Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about recruitment in digital, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Steer. Ed is the CEO at Sphere Digital Recruitment. Sphere places candidates into AdTech, vendors, agencies, brands and publishers, and across roles in sales, customer success, digital marketing, data and product in locations such as the UK, Europe and North America. Hi Ed, how's it going?
Hey Dale, good thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Like you're just talking offline, kind of getting used to the fact that, you know, it's just the norm now with COVID, and the year's just gone really fast, and Q4's literally around the corner, which should bring its challenges and rewards, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's been a crazy year. We actually, this morning we started to speak really in detail about next year. So we're kind of planned for Q4, and we're, as a leadership team, getting into next year, which is exciting.
And I'm guessing those plans and those conversations about 2022 are very different to what, or are they different to what you were talking about this time last year for 2021?
That's a really good question. Everything's just moved faster. So we knew we were going to be opening our New York office next year, and we were doing that kind of come what may. We had enough confidence by this time last year because Q2 last year was really challenging and Q3 was. But by this time last year, we were confident enough to know that all of our medium-term plans were intact. So we knew we were definitely doing America, and that's now happening. We're in the visa application process at the moment. So yes, we are doing all the things we thought we'd be doing this time last year. It's just the pace that things have moved at has been much faster than we expected, which is a really good problem to have. And we're kind of back to managing the old problems, which is how you manage a really expanding business with lots of people in it and lots of new people in it, and where it's really hard to find people. So I know today we're talking about recruitment in the digital world, but we have the same challenge. Finding good people is really tough for us too.
And you've grown quite a bit, right, over the last few years. So I've obviously worked with you guys for a number of years now. I think you've probably placed me in a couple of roles over the years. And I think maybe it was like 20, 30 people, or what's it like now?
This year we'll have had about 30 new starters this year. Wow. So it's been a really aggressive year for headcount expansion. Last year, sadly, we kind of downsized by about 20 people. So we're kind of headcounts around about 65 to 70, and we're kind of as we were pre-COVID from a headcount point of view, a little bit bigger. Nice.
And kind of going straight into it, really, I think it's such an important topic, isn't it, to talk about recruitment in digital. Everyone has been involved in the recruitment process that is probably listening to this podcast episode right now. So I think it's such an interesting topic with what's happened in the last year and a half. I think it's just become more front of mind, and various topics around recruitment as well. But I suppose the first question really is, has COVID impacted certain departments within digital? Have you seen, certain departments being affected more than others?
There's been different phases to it. So if we just go through that kind of bit by bit, I think in Q2 and Q3 last year when COVID hit, so end of Q1 last year, it was pretty indiscriminate, and it was really tough everywhere. So our clients are AdTech vendors, agencies, brands, for kind of e-commerce roles within brands and direct-to-consumer businesses and publishers. And we also work with MarTech vendors and, more broadly speaking, SaaS businesses. And into those organisations we're placing tech sales, customer success, product, both sorts of hires. And when COVID hit, we went from taking 85 new vacancies a week to 11. So you can imagine that was like really brutal. And that was about 2 months. It was pretty indiscriminate. There were organisations who were still hiring. And I think that was really businesses that were in, some businesses very quickly had products that they realised would be pretty robust. And others were just in such long-term investment cycles, they continued to hire. So I'm sure we can share this, but TikTok are a big client of ours, and TikTok absolutely continued to hire, as did Amazon and some direct-to-consumer businesses. But I think COVID was so unexpected. The initial jolt was everywhere. And I know we're going to come on to a salary survey later, but when we did our salary survey last year, it was the only time we've ever seen a drop in salaries in digital, and the kind of pendulum swing to being what we'd call a very job-led market. So if you were hiring, there were a lot of candidates, and that was a sweet spot for hiring. Q2, Q3, Q4 last year, there was brilliant talent who'd been on furlough or who'd been made redundant. But to answer your question in terms of how that emerged, what we saw happen pretty quickly was all things paid media became very resilient. So the agencies, as an example, were rehiring into their paid media teams, PPC, SEO, paid social, pretty quickly. And that was all to do with direct consumer. People were sitting at home and spending money. So direct consumer businesses, client side, away from things like travel. If you just think about the categories that were worst hit, the categories that were worst hit took longer to recover, but the categories that boomed actually were hiring again pretty quickly, particularly into kind of e-commerce roles. So all things paid media, product, tech, those sorts of sectors. From a technology vendor point of view, some technology was doing very well. So streaming services, video. So agency sales hires picked up in those sorts of sectors pretty quickly, and then the same with other SaaS vendors. Again, some SaaS organisations had tech that businesses really needed. So things like online video, not from an ad sales point of view, but from a technology point of view, from a hosting point of view, or cloud-based products. They were all doing pretty well too. What was really interesting, and what's been so amazing to see, was display returned actually with a vengeance, and it was really cool. And I think display picked up very quickly, and more broadly speaking, actually AdTech, we'd seen a fairly flat AdTech market in, I think, from the GDPR period, a lot of consolidation, brand safety. Just as with tech, it's cyclical, but we'd seen, our ad tech teams not actually expand a huge amount. Also, they were very big functions for us, so it's harder to get growth where you're already pretty established. But what's been amazing, I'd say, towards the back end of last year and this year, is just the next wave of ad technology. The role of creativity, the cookieless future, things like advertising based on context. There's a lot, as you know all about. There's a lot of really cool things that have happened in ad tech. So I'd say phase wise, it was a very tough beginning, and then anything linked to paid media and e-commerce came back quickly. And then actually, as we'll come on to, we're now just in a very overheated market where there's, for various reasons, everyone hiring and not enough talent, which I think we hope will level out actually over the next 6 to 12 months, because too much demand is a problem too.
Yeah, definitely. And did you find that most of the candidates that were coming to you, or prospective candidates, came from a travel background, or they lost their roles within the travel industry or various other industries that were affected more so than others, hospitality industry, and then how easy was it for them to, change that skill set? Because a lot of the skills can be replicable, right? From travel to fashion to retail to CPG. How did that kind of, how did that work out?
I think there was, again, phases to it. So we could see where people were being let go. It was actually a lot of senior leadership in agencies in particular, and the senior roles were the last to return. And then it was based on categories, like we say, travel, retail, some parts of retail, hospitality, etc. And then actually, initially, it was probably quite hard for people to find work again because there wasn't the available roles. And then actually, when the job market picked up, there was brilliant people who might be amazing at PPC on travel who could very quickly switch to autos or whatever it might be. So there was this wave of talent that had the digital skill set, be that in agency sales, programmatic trading, media planning, CRM, PPC, and there was an abundance of talent that wouldn't usually be on the market. So actually there was a real sweet spot. The companies who rebounded the fastest and were hiring in Q2, Q3, Q4 last year picked off some brilliant talent that is very, very, very hard to find in usual circumstances. What we haven't seen yet, which I think is part of the solution, to hiring is people cross-training on skills. So there's a real reluctance, when we're being briefed on roles, and we fully understand this, we're briefed to find the person who's got the right skill set, but there's still not much movement in terms of companies retraining the right people who don't have quite the right skill set.
That's an interesting point. So would you say the companies that were hiring kind of wanted a ready-made person, and there was probably a larger pool to choose from, so they could be a little bit more picky? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, for a period, yeah. And then that's just been completely flipped on its head. It was quite weird. When we actually launched our salary survey, so we've done a mini snapshot one, which we did in August, so really pretty recent. And we're just now, Q4 is always when we start the research for our big salary survey, which we'll launch next year. So last year we did the research throughout Q4, October, November, December. It takes a few months to write up and, get the presentation looking spot on. And by the time we launched the salary survey in March this year, we kind of launched it and said, I know this is our salary survey, but please ignore it, because by March this year, it had switched from being really candidate rich, where people were available and would have lower expectations and were being slightly less demanding, to by March this year, just not that situation. Yeah. So it's just incredible the change of pace across sort of Q4 to Q1 this year, and usual trends completely out the window. Like usually in August we see a slowdown in hiring because it's August, and not the case. I also think with things like people working from home, it's so much easier to schedule interviews. So whereas people might be on holiday, and this isn't a good thing, by the way, from the survey results we can talk about, I've got the stat here, but burnout, 53% of people feel like they're experiencing burnout in their jobs, and an example of that is someone might be on holiday but they can still hop on a Zoom call to do an interview. So it's been a really different market to what we've ever seen before.
That's really interesting. And what would you say candidates are looking for in a job?
Flexibility, number one thing. So that's not changed actually for a few years now. It's always been flexibility, and clearly the working from home debate is kind of over to the extent that we've all proved we can do it. We all know that it's super productive, and flexibility remains the number one thing that people want. For what it's worth, I think the flexibility conversation is a new one now. I don't think it's about just where you're working from. I think it's about what hours of the day you're working. So if you've got a school run, naturally you can be offline from 3 till 4 and come back online and do an amazing job. So I think the next wave of flexibility is about your working from home policy, but then it's also about like other things, dress code in the office, people's working hours, and this is a huge piece around inclusion as well. But I think the next wave of flexibility is not just where you're working from, it's what else companies are considering. But that's the number one thing. That was 73% the most important thing, and then pay is obviously right up there at 64% as the number one driver.
And then it's an interesting point you mentioned. A lot of everyone now needs that flexibility, like you said, whether it's dropping kids off in the morning and in the afternoon, picking them up. Have you found any candidates or people in the industry have left the industry because they couldn't deal with the pressures of a 9 to 7, 9 to 8 job, maybe at an agency or a media owner? Have you seen some people kind of come back now because they're like, well, everyone's working from home. I can log on, do some work in the morning, in the day, and log back on when the kids have gone to sleep. That'd be interesting to know.
I wouldn't have the data around that. I'd have to speak to our team for live examples. I'm sure there are, particularly for working parents. I'm sure there are. What has happened, which also happened in 2008, I'm old enough to remember that as a recruitment consultant. I wasn't doing Sphere then, but I was a few years into my career for my previous company. And in 2008, what happened is lots of people leave the industries they're in because there's redundancy and people just have a life rethink. So I think sadly a lot of talent left media agencies and ad tech vendors and publishers, junior talent who were let go but found their way into other industries, and then people had a life rethink. And that's a real challenge. And you look at something, that's not discriminant to digital and tech. The city's going to have the same problem. Lots of bankers who might have made lots of money, but they're sitting at home thinking, "Oh, actually, do I want to keep doing this?" I think with such a significant change in our lifestyles and really, really pivotal moment, I guess, a very significant moment for us all. Sadly, there has been a lot of talent that left. There's also a talent gap. So everyone loves hiring people who've got a year's experience, 1 to 2 years experience, on the rise, future talent, but knows how to, traffic a campaign or optimize a campaign or has some relationships and agencies. No one hired future talent last year in Q2, Q3 and Q4. Our last team to return to its usual levels of demand was our future talent team. So when you take into consideration a lot of junior people left the industry and then no one hired, or a lot fewer people were hired into junior roles, that talent pipeline, which is already very challenging for 1 to 2 years experience, there's just a gap, and that can't be solved really. That's just 6 to 9 months of talent not coming into an industry that usually does, and that adds to some of the hiring challenges at the moment.
So they just completely change roles and directions of their career.
Yeah, did something else, and also you need businesses hiring future talent, school leavers, graduates, so that a year later you have people with a year's experience. If I just looked at Sphere's business, we always have future talent coming into the business. We have a gap because we didn't hire future talent last year. We have our people with 2 years experience and our new people, but we don't have the people with a year's experience in the business, and that's okay. But it's that's just because of what happened last year.
I think it's so important, isn't it, to get kind of the fresh batch, the entrants coming in, whether it's out of uni or whether it's with no degrees. Tons of people in our industry don't have degrees, and
absolutely,
and if anything, they're smarter than the people that do have degrees. But I think that's such an important thing. You need this next wave of leaders to come through.
You
and
really do.
If it's just the same people that are just constantly moving from company to company within our industry, then you're kind of lacking that, I think, freshness and that innovation. So yeah, I think that's really important. What advice would you give to candidates looking for a job, whether they're new entrants or even been within the industry for some time?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's a really personal decision. So I would say it's really important to understand what it is you love doing and what it is you're best at doing and what it is you really want. And that really is a personal choice. So yeah, I think it's identifying what you love doing and then finding a company where you think you're going to be given a chance to excel at that. I think if we looked at why people leave jobs, there is, of course, things like lack of flexibility and pay, but it usually comes down to management and value. So how listened to do people feel? How valued do people feel? How well cared for do people feel? So I think it's knowing what you want from your career and then actually finding people who you think are really gonna take good care of you and where you're going to get listened to and heard. But this isn't a criticism, but I would have been. I've only ever worked from uni into an 80-person recruitment company, and then I set up my own company. So I was thinking, God, a company with thousands of people, I couldn't imagine myself being there. That's not to say they're not incredible places to build great careers. So I think knowing yourself comes into it. That's really hard when you're at the beginning of your career, to know yourself, because you have to go on that journey. I think the more experience you get, the more you know yourself. So I would say pick something you like doing, and I also think there's a lot to be said for sticking at things. If you focus on something, you do it a lot, you get really good at it. What I think is not healthy is just moving for money. I know it's really tempting, but I don't know. Your paycheck is important, but it's not what makes you feel really fulfilled at work every day. It's part of it, but it's not the be all and end all. Definitely,
and it's interesting. I talk to whether it's clients or friends in the industry that have just entered, and that's exactly what I say to them is, don't especially kind of if you've just started your career, don't chase the money. Obviously it's very important that you do have a good enough salary, for what you do. But I think it's important to see the environment that you're in. What's your boss like? What is the culture like? Do you get on with everyone there? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest company and, like you said, 1,000 people. There are pros and cons to both sides, a small company as well as a big company. But yeah, I think it's really focusing on, what will really, aid your development. And you need to, sometimes you just need to write things down. You just need to write down, this is what I want. This is what I want from my role. And writing it down and kind of taking it from there, really. I think that's super important. So I totally align with what you're saying in terms of just not always about the salary.
Yeah, and writing things down is so important. And also, you get sold to throughout a process, recruitment consultants and businesses. So what you think at the beginning is probably what you'll end up thinking at the end. So I always like writing things down. So I think if I'm going to be influenced for the next 4 weeks, what did I think before I started getting influenced? Because it's nice to kind of go back to that as you meet really cool people, and it's good to remember what you wanted at the start.
And new candidates, and I was there many years ago. You're applying for jobs, nothing's coming through. It's this, you think you've had an amazing interview, and you don't really get much feedback on kind of why you didn't get the role. So in that sense, is there any advice that you would give? Is it literally just keep going? Obviously, the CV is such an important tool. So you need to make sure your CV's right. Is there any other advice you'd give to these new candidates if they have been constantly knocked back, which I think a lot of people can resonate with?
Yeah, if you're new to the market, I would say an entry level. I think being focused on what you want really helps. One of the main things businesses want to see is that someone has an idea of what they want to do. It's just like any form of targeting, isn't it? You want relevance. So if you're interviewing someone for X job, you want to know they're interested in that job. So being really specific about what you want and why is important. Finding a good recruiter, I think, can really help because the preparation you get and the advice you get through the process. And there's a human on the end of the phone, because that was the really hard thing, actually. Going back to last year, I know it's a bit of a different tangent, which I'm guilty of sometimes, but it was so hard last year when we had months where we were speaking to people who were, and this was actually really tough, not just for people who were school leavers or graduates who couldn't find a role. It was when people were kind of into their career and they had mortgages to pay, and when there was brilliant people on the phone to us all day, every day, saying, I'm online looking, not getting any responses, how is it? And we just had to say for 2 months that we're really sorry, we're here, but there's no jobs. That was just like really not on a human level, a really tough experience for everyone. And of course, our role was to listen and to support people who were going through that. But yeah, I think keeping the faith, knowing what you want to do and really sticking at it. But it's a great time to look for a job. And actually, broadly speaking, across digital, it's proven again to be so robust. I mean, it's pretty obvious that technology is here to stay, and it's the direction of travel for us in every part of our life. So you'd do well to find a better space to be in right now than any form of technology-led marketing, sales sort of organisational role.
Yeah, there's I've always found that, no year's ever the same as the previous year in terms of innovation, creativity, new startups, coming out of nowhere really, and new verticals being formed. It's, I totally agree with you that we're obviously highly biased, but there's not a better industry to be in, right?
There's really not, and COVID's just accelerated that. These are not new trends, but it's just the demand for it. And it was the same 2008. Sorry to sort of go back there again, but I remember when marketing budgets were cut in 2008, and when the high street was affected, there was still already a real drive towards performance-led marketing and e-commerce. So we were speaking to a lot of, in 2008, travel agents who are on the high street or retailers who are on the high street. And even back then it was kind of like, we need to build e-commerce teams. That was much less advanced, but whilst they might have profit warnings on the one hand, they'd still be making heavy redundancies in some roles whilst hiring e-commerce talent. And I won't say the company, but in July this year there was a very big retailer which were pretty close to going to administration, and we actually asked for all the money up front because we wanted to make sure we got paid. But whilst there was, store closures left, right, and centre, the route forward for the business was e-commerce. So from a demand point of view, although they were in trouble, the route out was building a really strong e-commerce team. So there was still that demand for paid search, paid social, product, data, SEO talent for that business. It's a really robust sector across the board, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these companies that were thinking to digitalize, they were before COVID thinking, okay, we can do it 5-10 years, slowly get things done. And then, March 2020, everyone had to think, no, we need to do it now, or we should have done it a year ago. And I can imagine there's a lot of companies playing catch up and, hiring consultants or, really cutting back on their offline businesses and, their retail businesses and focusing on digital, which now you would think there is kind of like that sweet spot where, you need retail as well as online. And I think now we're in a much better place than we were then. I think it's the uncertainty, right? There's more the uncertainty. No one knew what was obviously going to happen, how long things would last, lockdowns, etc. But now I think there's a lot more confidence in the market, and that must be reflective of the recruitment industry as well, and candidates moving around. And I even remember speaking to friends in the industry last year, and even if they weren't happy in their role, they wanted to stick at it because they need to pay their mortgage. They need to, So it was a difficult decision. But what I've seen now is in the last 3 to 6 months, people are moving, and there are roles being created, and people are taking that slight risk now to think, you know what, it'll be fine. It's not as scary as it was maybe this time last year. Is that something? Is that what you're seeing on your side with the candidates that you're talking to, and especially your team that's talking to these candidates day to day?
Yeah, the challenge at the moment for organisations is finding people. So there's a few factors. First of all, last year companies didn't hire as much, so there was less new talent coming into the organisations. And they may or may not have made redundancies, but let's say most businesses did make redundancies last year. So there was smaller teams because of redundancy and smaller teams because of not hiring, which was in response to less demand and less revenue and all the uncertainty that we knew. And then because actually business performance is up, I've got the stat here. 78% of businesses we surveyed are hiring in 2021 because of increased revenue. So it's a really, businesses are performing, which is great to see for everyone. But you've got businesses who hadn't hired, who may have cut back, and demand returned faster than they realised. Companies are experiencing churn because people are now moving again. So it's kind of like we don't have enough people and we're churning. And then there's also a lot of new market entrants and new roles being created. So really across the board, businesses largely want to hire, and there's not enough available talent. And where there is available talent, they're being briefed on and have a huge amount of opportunities. So let's take a programmatic trader. I'm not on our CRM, but with relative confidence, if we looked at a trader with a basic salary range of 35k to 55k, we'd probably have somewhere between 50 to 60 open briefs for that trader. If you look across agencies, tech vendors and publishers and a few client-side roles as well. So it's a really hard time for businesses to hire, and of course, and to retain as well. And it's a really, if candidates are entering the market, then they'll find there's an abundance of opportunities. But that doesn't mean it's right to move. So I'm actually not ever in the business of saying what a great time to move. I think that's where recruiters can play a really bad job in the market. Like people need to move roles for good healthy reasons, not just because there's lots of them. But it's been just look at our lives. It's been a frustrating period. We've kind of in our houses, loads of uncertainty, not having things to look forward to, and everyone's starting to move around again, and confidence is returning, and naturally that means people are probably thinking about is now the time to make a move. So there is absolutely available talent for companies to hire, and there's really great roles for people who are looking to move. So it's it's a good time to look, and it's a good time to hire. It's just about getting it right.
And looking at the other side, what can companies do to retain their talent? Would you say to stop their best teams to leaving?
I think that it's two things, isn't it? Focusing on how you attract people is really important, but I always think even more important than that is looking after the people who you've got. So I did make some notes about this, but I think flexibility is really important. Taking care of people, it's been a tough period. If we consider that burnout stat, if there is an overheated demand for what you do, and if you are a few heads short and everyone's working crazy hours, taking care of people through that process is really important. So if work is overwhelming, how do we help people not feel overwhelmed? Showing people progression beyond just what they're doing now. I think really making sure you've got career paths and career plans for people. So good, meaningful, here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's the role that you can play. Lots of listening. What do people want? What do people need? So as much inclusion as possible. I think for bigger businesses, repurposing people. If you've got open roles in one department and someone who's interested in that, they might not have the right skills, but if they're a great person, they're valuable to you. Don't be afraid to kind of to repurpose talent. So I think internal mobility is a big one, and then pay reviews. Having a structured pay review so people know when they're having them. Like, I actually am not completely against counter offers. I think sometimes people resign from a role and it's not quite their time, and in the right circumstance, counter offers can be really important. But it's much better to get to people before you're in a counter offer stage. So, what I know this is a bit of just a word, but communication, just really, really, really telling people what's happening, what's going on. Like very, very, very strong communication, especially in a more remote environment. If people want to interview right now, it's really, really, really easy. That's one of the benefits for us as a recruitment company from the new way of kind of hiring is, you remember, it's like you want to go to an interview, but it's 6:30 at night on a rainy Tuesday. It's not that appealing to do the interview or go to it. Of course it is, but that's not the case anymore. It's like, let's just hop on a Zoom call. When are you free? So if people are at home more and feeling unloved, it's easy for them to hop on a Zoom call.
Yeah, it's not like in the past you've got your boss sat next to you and you've got a recruitment agent. Can you make a quick call now? And you kind of have to just leave and go outside. And I've done that plenty of times in the past over the years. Yeah. No, it's brilliant.
So there's a retention piece, and then actually I'd include in that onboarding, because if you do manage to hire someone, you want to keep them. So in the new world, that pre-boarding and onboarding process needs to be really slick from an inclusion point of view when you've got new joiners.
Yeah, I think what stuck out with what you just said now, I think a lot of it is communication, especially in the COVID world, the pandemic, lockdowns, etc. And that's where I think Seedtag was amazing. The two founders kind of got everyone on a call and said, look, we know what's happening. We just want you guys to be confident. We're not making any furloughs. We're not making any redundancies. You've all secured your jobs. Look after your families. You need to obviously do what you can in terms of work, but that's a second priority. I think just having that simple conversation and that transparent conversation makes a world of difference on people's motivation. If your founders, your leaders are saying that to you, you want to work for that person, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's an incredible thing to have happened, and so few businesses did that. In fact, many proactively did different things. And so to be the organisations that managed COVID well are the ones that have come out in brilliant shape. And it was you learn a lot about people. You learn much more about people when it's tough than when it's good, I think.
Yeah, and I think kind of a little side note, it's when you are looking for a role, whether it's new entrant or someone that's already been in the industry, have that conversation with people that already work at that potential company, and get those insights, because it's those types of companies you want to work for, where you're treated like adults, where you've got that flexibility, where you've obviously do have pay reviews. I think they're so important as well. Just have that conversation going. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And so really good management makes a massive difference. And what I know, this is a bit more of a talent attraction thing, but we which I think is important, where companies are hiring right now, is actually being aware of what's happening in the market. So everyone thinks they're special, and that's a good thing. But if you're one of 20 companies, 30 companies, 40 companies trying to hire the same person, having a really slick process which is thorough and also consistent and fairly quick is important. And if it's a remote process, really making sure that you're listening to people and actually selling to them, and being really taking the time to talk through the business and the plans, and not just, is this person right for the job. There's some things that companies need to do really well at the moment to actually land people in this market.
And obviously companies should be using all the tools available to them, right, to make these decisions. And you guys release your salary survey, which could be used as a tool, right, for insights and knowledge in recruitment. Yeah. Tell me more about the survey and kind of some interesting stats or any key findings.
Yeah, so we have just done a snapshot survey in August. We survey. This was actually very, very, very candidate focused. So we survey candidates across AdTech vendors, agencies, brands, and publishers. We look at what roles they do, and we find out kind of what they're looking for, and then we speak to organisations and find out the similar sets of questions. So if it's okay, Dan, I'm going to read these ones to you because I want to get it right. But we can all see, actually, if we just look at the world around us, whether it's lorry drivers or care home workers, we are in a market where there's over 1 million jobs in the UK at the moment, which is the highest since 2001. And this is not just a UK issue. This is America, Europe. We have extra factors in the UK that we'll know about, but it's a global challenge. But yeah, as we mentioned. So 70% of companies said they found the market more tough than pre-lockdown because of candidates taking other job offers. I mean, that's just a reflection of how many jobs are in the market. We mentioned about businesses' increase in revenue has been a driver of growth. 76% of job seekers are seeking better opportunities. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it means that people are thinking about leaving. I think the good thing there, if I've got my employer hat on, is that if we're getting this right for people, actually a lot of people are thinking about moving. So it's a funny market where there's a real shortage of talent, coupled with a lot of people who are thinking about moving. We've said that, as I mentioned earlier, flexible working and pay are the two most important factors that people are deciding on when taking a role. And a challenge that businesses are facing, 58% of businesses have found that they're struggling to meet salary demands. So in a market which is overheated, someone's always paying a bit more, and that's proving to be a problem. There's also this comment about burnout. So showing yourself as an empathetic employer is important. And 40% of people think they're being more productive from home. So it's that, keeping people productive from home. So yeah, what I will do is I'll send over the survey with the breakdown, and we'll be launching in. And it's a bit of time away now in February, a much more detailed salary survey with touch points that look at two things. We look at what candidates want very specifically by the job they do, and then the industry they work in, be that tech vendor or agency or publisher or brand. But yeah, and then also marrying that up with what employers offer. But if I take the data we've got, and also just from speaking to people in the market, I think the thing that employers can get most right now is clarity around their flexible working policy. I know it might be a bit too soon to decide, but the more certainty people have about that for the future, the better. And considering not just when you're in the office, but where you can work from, hours you can work from, so that flexibility piece. Really strong on not just the role that people will be doing, but what the future holds. So, a really good idea of where the business is going and what role people will play. And this for me has stood the test for time. The best way to hire people is always about process. It's about a really, really slick process where candidates know what they're coming into, know who they're talking to, know how long there's going to be between each stage, and that there's a really efficient process. So, if a process for us right now is we send a CV to a client and a week and a half later a client gets back to us, they simply will not be hiring that person. And that's not like, I know it can sound a bit threatening, but it's just like there has to be a really, really good process between whether there's an internal recruitment function or not. There's a whole bunch of ways that companies hire, but that process needs to be really, really slick.
And that just sets the example, really, doesn't it, for the candidate? And if it's taken a couple of months for a company to get back to you, the recruitment team, the HR team, you kind of, for me anyway, it would just put you off, because you think, first impressions are everything. And like you said, there's so many other companies out there, so many cool, interesting, innovative companies that are out there. You think, well, do I really want to be joining a job or a company where, they probably don't care as much, really, or they don't have the processes in line, and it's just a little bit all over the place.
Showing people the love, it goes a long way. If you speak to someone and you feel immediately understood and valued by them, showing people love goes a long way.
Exactly. And just one question, really, in terms of, I know you guys operate in various different markets, and you recruit for various different markets. Have you seen any differences market to market, whether that's been recruitment in COVID or just in general, what candidates look for or what companies look for? Just generally speaking, is there a difference market to market?
There's definitely different nuances. As an example, Germany and the US we found more robust than the UK last year, just as small examples, and that would reflect it across recruitment outside of digital. At the moment, no. The challenge that we have as recruiters, and it's shared with our clients, is what we would call being really candidate short. So there's not enough talent to fulfill the roles that are open, and that really is everywhere. And then when you do find someone, counter offers are insane, and offers from other companies are insane, and it's a really hard time to hire. So I think what I tend to say to our clients at the moment, who are kind of like, we can't hire, are we doing something wrong? But obviously we explore that, but generally it's a really tough time to hire. But it's a strange thing to say, it will level out.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I've got one final question. As I ask all the guests on the podcast, if you had a superpower in AdTech, what would it be? Okay,
so I'm going to sit on the fence of this, which is just a belief. I think that there's any number of brilliant things that people can do in AdTech, and I think it's always about being the best version of yourself and the best at what you can do. So if you're in product, be the best in product. If you're in sales, be the best in sales. If you're in data, be the best in data. And there's so many different ways to have a really fulfilling career in AdTech. But on the spot, I would want to be the most incredible founder who came up with the best product ever, that kind of changed everything and enriched the advertising world, and was really valuable.
That's a brilliant answer. I think that's what everyone would like to be, right? The person that changes the whole industry and flips it. But no, that's a perfect answer.
There's different ways to be a great founder as well, right? You can be the tech person, the marketing person, the sales person. People do it in all sorts of different ways.
Definitely. Brilliant. Well, no, thanks for that, Ed. I think that's all we've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed the time on this episode.
Absolutely, Dan. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ed.